Hello and welcome to Samuel's Fortress. I'm your host Kirill, and today we're going to be discussing the life of Colonel Boris Drangov. And this past week, on Wednesday, March 15th, 2023, it was the 151st birthday anniversary for Colonel Boris Drangov. He was born 1 month after Delchev in 1872. And throughout this video, I'll be referencing a biographical essay on Colonel Drangov written by Professor Todor Petrov, which was published back in 2017 in the Macedonian Review. Now, Boris Drangov was born to a relatively well-to-do family in Ottoman-occupied Macedonia. Specifically, he's from the city of Skopje, where his father Stoyan was a local wine and timber merchant, and Boris Drangov spent his childhood in Skopje, where he eventually graduated with a teaching degree at the age of 18 in 1890. Shortly thereafter, he left for Bulgaria to further his education and would end up enrolling in the Bulgarian Military Academy in Sofia in the summer of 1891. At that time, the military academy had Bulgarian cadets from various different regions, ranging from Macedonia to Bessarabia. And beside Drangov himself, the academy had enrolled in it people who would eventually become leaders of the internal Macedonian revolutionary organizations such as Delchev and Boris Sarafov. While at the academy, Boris Drangov spent a lot of his time studying military history and military tactics, and specifically he focused on the military tactics of Alexander the Great, Hannibal, Caesar, and Napoleon. And after exhausting all the military resources available to him in the Bulgarian language, he then started researching Russian language sources. However, his main focus while he was at the military academy was the liberation of the occupied territories of Macedonia and Thrace.
While a cadet, Drangov did not remain aloof to the struggle of his oppressed compatriots in Macedonia and Thrace, and directed constant attention at the lot of those Bulgarians who remained within the Ottoman Empire after Bulgarian liberation. Fellow cadet Stamat Stamatov later described Drangov's sense of patriotism as developed to the utmost degree and thoroughly contagious. Macedonia for him was a hallowed land.
While at the academy, Drangov and the other future revolutionaries began plotting the liberation of Macedonia. However, these revolutionary activities would actually get them expelled from the military academy. In June of 1894, he was formally expelled from the academy and stripped of his rank of senior cadet. He was then sent to Plovdiv to serve in the 3rd Cavalry Regiment for the remainder of his senior year. However, he did so well as part of that cavalry regiment that he was readmitted into the academy a few months later in October. The following year, in 1895, Boris Drangov graduated from the Sofia Military Academy and was awarded the rank of junior lieutenant. He was then sent back to Plovdiv to the 3rd Cavalry Regiment to serve as a platoon commander. In 1898, he was promoted to full lieutenant and sent to the city of Lom to lead the 2nd Cavalry Regiment. Now, in addition to his military service, Boris Drangov was also a prolific writer and publisher of military literature during this time. From 1895 to 1903, he would publish over 20 articles in various Bulgarian military journals and newspapers. He wrote mainly on the topics of military history and the training of cavalry units. One of his main works during this time was entitled A Detailed Program for the Training of Young Soldiers and Privates. And the Bulgarian war minister at that time, Major General Stefan Paprikov, would make that work mandatory reading for all young officers in Bulgaria. Now, in the summer of 1903, Lieutenant Boris Drangov would actually leave the 2nd Cavalry Regiment and relocate to the city of Radomir. What was happening in Radomir at that time was that members of the internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization were forming chetas, or guerrilla bands, in preparation for an anti-Ottoman uprising in Macedonia. That uprising would come to be known as the Ilinden Uprising or the St. Elijah's Day Uprising. Drangov spent his time in Radomir training and drilling the guerrillas in military tactics, and on August 2nd of 1903, the Ilinden Uprising was launched as Drangov prepared to lead his men into Macedonia.
On the eve of his departure, Lieutenant Drangov found the time to write a brief letter to his wife. The contents of that letter reveal the personal outlook of a fiery and loyal patriot who entertained not even the slightest hesitation in placing his fatherland above all else. There has never been a more strenuous time for Mother Macedonia, writes the young officer. She has never needed the strength, toil, and blood of her brave sons more. I sense this remarkably well, and being a devoted son of hers, I cannot fail to rise to her martyred summons.
On August 30th, 1903, Drangov's Cheta crossed the border into Macedonia. They made their way towards the city of Kratovo and established their position on Plavica mountain. In early September, the Ottomans sent a force of 300 men towards Kratovo to suppress rebel activity. However, Drangov's Cheta managed to ambush this Ottoman force, which resulted in a day-long battle. At the end of the day, the Cheta managed to kill 25 Turkish soldiers while only taking 2 casualties. The Ottomans then sent 4 additional units to confront Drangov. However, he took his Cheta and retreated back across the border into Bulgaria. Now, despite the fact that the Ilinden uprising was ultimately a failure, Boris Drangov did gain some valuable military experience and proved himself to be a competent officer. The following year, in 1904, he was awarded with the privilege of studying at the Russian Military Academy in St. Petersburg. He spent 3 years there and graduated with distinction and the rank of cavalry captain. His senior thesis was given the highest grade possible and was actually published in the Academy's annual journal. He was actually the first Bulgarian officer ever to be published by the Russian Military Academy. Upon his return to Bulgaria, he was appointed to the General Staff and served in the Ministry of War. A few years later, in 1910, he was promoted to the rank of major, and he taught military tactics at the Military Academy in Sofia. And during this entire time, he continued to publish in the top military journals in the country. Now, one of his greatest achievements as a teacher at the Military Academy was the transformation or the reformation of the style of education which the cadets received. Drangov despised this more academic, textbook-focused education which a lot of the cadets received and really preferred more of a practical or hands-on approach.
He stated that teaching the subject of tactics has become the realm of endless babble, of undignified parrot-style repetition, of sad self-deception. Military subjects are being taught in a mechanical and literal fashion. They are taught mainly so that something would remain in the student's head until the revision session, or in the best case, until the examination, and then only so that they would obtain passing grades. He then directed this call. Let us abandon the rot medieval method of instruction which makes an idiot of the cadet by cramming his head with entirely useless and even harmful matters. Major Drangov's idea of cadets going on outings to the sites linked to Bulgarian military history was adopted in its entirety. The first outings, held in 1911, saw cadets visit Pleven and Slivnica and tour the sites of battles from the Russo-Turkish War of 1877 to 1878 and the Serbo-Bulgarian War of 1885, including explanations of the tactical approaches used by the adversaries. Practice showed that cadets absorbed the subject easily and eagerly, and at the same time they acquired solid military knowledge.
Finally, in October of 1912, Drangov's chance to liberate Macedonia and Thrace from the Ottomans had finally arrived with the start of the First Balkan War. He was appointed commander of the 1st Brigade of the 1st Infantry Division. He fought and defeated the Ottoman forces in some of the fiercest battles of the war on the Thracian front, such as Lozengrad, Čatalja, Odrin, and Luleburgas.
Brigade Staff Head Boris Drangov gave his contribution to these glorious victories. In the battle's most fraught and critical moments, he showed coolness, self-abnegation, and courage, personally leading the troops at Suloglu in a headlong attack, sword in hand. He was later to be awarded the Order of Valor for gallantry in combat.
Now, in the summer of 1913, during the Second Balkan War, when Bulgaria would declare war on its former allies of the First Balkan War, Drangov was transferred from the east on the Thracian front to the western part of the country to fight in Macedonia. Specifically, he would lead his forces against the Greek army in the Struma Valley. Now, despite Bulgaria's fierce efforts, ultimately it would be overpowered and would lose the Second Balkan War. Now, Drangov and other officers were furious with certain political and military leaders who they viewed as responsible for Bulgaria's loss in that war. Drangov himself could not remain silent and publicly called out those leaders who he felt were guilty for betraying Bulgaria and losing the war. Because of his post-war commentary, he would ultimately be charged with libel and court-martialed by the military. Now, despite ultimately being acquitted of those charges, he did still face punishment by the military high command. For example, he was passed over for promotion, and he lost command of the 1st Brigade and was sent to the 21st Infantry Regiment in Devin. However, in February of 1915, due to intense public pressure, he was promoted to the rank of lieutenant colonel by Major General Kliment Boyadjiev.
Meanwhile, the flames of the Great War, which had burned for some months now, spread to ever more countries. Though adhering to neutrality, Bulgaria was also preparing to enter the war. In parallel with other measures, the Bulgarian command planned to convene a separate division composed of Macedonian and Thracian refugees. It would wage war using the tactics of the Macedonian and Adrianople irregulars during the Balkan Wars. Lieutenant Colonel Boris Drangov was appointed commanding officer of this division's 5th Infantry Regiment. Immediately after Bulgaria's October 1915 entry into the war, the 11th Macedonian Infantry Division, as the new unit was called, was detailed to Krivolak in Macedonia to attack and repulse Allied units in the area. The men of Drangov's regiment received their baptism of fire on October 31st, when his 3rd Company was ordered to cover the flank of the 6th Macedonian Infantry Regiment. The very next day, he toured the battlefield, personally visiting each company's position, instilling courage in the men, and instructing them on the art of combat. The regiment began advancing on December 3rd. The men attacked enemy positions on the left bank of the Vardar, managing to capture 2 lines of trenches. The entire Allied position was taken over in the subsequent days. Lieutenant Colonel Drangov was invariably in the forefront, encouraging and directing his men.
During the First World War, after the liberation of Macedonia, Boris Drangov was given the position of commanding officer at the Bulgarian Reserve Officer School in Skopje in May of 1916.
Eminent Bulgarian writer Dimitar Chorbajiski remembers this about his favorite school commander. Drangov possessed countless qualities as a man and leader, a colossal energy that did not wane for an instant. Always and at every moment, we sensed his presence before us, behind us, around us, and each minute we expected him to ask us a question about the service, to which we were expected to give immediate, simple, and clear replies. At the beginning, we were flustered and prone to falter, but soon we got used to it and began giving rapid, curt, and soldierly replies. Our fear receded, for we loved him, and he loved us. He waited for us, corrected us, but he never punished us.
Now, it is worth noting that while in Skopje, Drangov published what is considered his greatest literary work entitled Remembering Warfare, which is essentially a compilation or a summary of all the military knowledge he had gained throughout his 20-year career as an officer. And once the class of reserve officers that he had taught in Skopje had graduated, he was then put in command of the 1st Infantry Division and sent to Dobruja to lead Bulgarian forces against the Romanians, and he would eventually capture the citadel at Tutrakan. After his many victories against the Romanians along the Danube, Drangov was then transferred to the Macedonian front in March of 1917, where he commanded the 9th Infantry Regiment near Prilep. On May 24, 1917, on the date of Saints Cyril and Methodius, Drangov assembled the Bulgarian troops and gave a speech on the life and the work of these 2 medieval saints, which greatly inspired his soldiers. Tragically, only 2 days later, on May 26, 1917, Drangov's position was attacked by Allied forces. Drangov himself was mortally wounded during a French artillery offensive and died later that day.
The news of the hero's death spread like lightning throughout the entire army. In the days to come, his family and the staff of his regiment received dozens of condolence telegrams. Thousands attended his funeral in Skopje. An order of the Minister of War posthumously promoted Lieutenant Colonel Boris Drangov to the rank of colonel for demonstrable excellence in combat. While a Bulgarian officer, he had also received other distinctions: 2 orders of valor, the Order of Military Merit, the Order of St. Anna from Russia, the Order of the Iron Cross from Germany, and the Order of the Iron Crescent from Turkey. Over 23 years, Colonel Boris Drangov served in more than 20 Bulgarian army units, taking ample opportunity to know, train, and instruct thousands of troops, and to share his wealth of experience in more than 150 articles, pamphlets, and books. During his brief life, he managed to take part in the 1903 St. Elijah's Day and Holy Transfiguration Uprising, and in the 3 wars of liberation and unification waged by the Bulgarian people between 1912 and 1918. He crossed the battlefields of Macedonia, Thrace, and Dobruja. Moreover, he never tasted the bitterness of defeat in combat. As Dr. Malchev, then serving as a private in the 5th Macedonian Infantry Regiment under Boris Drangov, stresses in his memoir, that Drangov continues to occupy the conscience of people through his work and self-sacrifice. Ever awake, ever upright, with a fiery gaze and a cheery smile, as if planted by an inscrutable hand to sow hope and to lead, and while doing so, embodied the Bulgarian spirit and the Bulgarians' unbreakable will in pursuing the unification of their fatherland.